He owns and operates the Pack-A-Day podcast that airs 365 days a year with over 12 million views on YouTube. A new adventure begins. It's time for the Pack-A-Day radio show with Andy Herman on 1250 AM and 105.7 FM The Fan, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook and on the free Odyssey app.
Happy training camp eve, Packers Nation. Happy Tuesday. Welcome into the Pack-A-Day radio show. We are live from the 1250 AM and 105.7 FM The Fan studios, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. My name is Andy Herman. We always appreciate you joining us here on the Pack-A-Day radio show, where we talk Packers every single day, 5 days a week, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., Monday through Friday. To help us celebrate the start of training camp tomorrow, we've got Paul Brettel joining us from ESPN Lacrosse. He'll be joining us at 8:20 a.m. today. As always, we'd love for you to join the show as well. Nicolay Law Fan Talk and Text line. You can find that 414-677-1250. Again, 414-677-1250. Easy enough. Text us, call us, do what you need to do. Get those questions and or comments in. Of course, some massive news from yesterday. Well, a couple ones. First of all, the Brewers won their 11th game in a row and just so happened to be the very best team in all of baseball. We'll talk a little bit about that, I'm sure, as well. But this is the, Pack-A-Day radio show. So we're going to lead off with the Packers, of course, and that means that we are going to talk about Zach freaking Tom and his 4-year contract extension. $88 million for Zach Tom, up to $92 million total. The deal includes a $30.2 million signing bonus, which I was actually surprised about, is the largest ever for an offensive lineman, breaking the previous records held by Tunsil and one David Bakhtiari. This is a very classic Packers type of deal in a variety of different ways. First of all, a draft and develop, find a guy in the, day 3 of the draft. He ends up performing well above expectations and they sign and keep their own guy. Secondly, I would say this is actually a little bit under market value, which we'll talk about in just a moment as well. But this is going to be one that has that big signing bonus. It's a 4-year deal. A lot of players not doing these 4-year deals anymore. Green Bay continues to do them. It can lead to some issues. See Jenkins, Elton, where you get to the 3rd year of the deal and realize that the Packers have some baked-in advantages in that 4-year deal. The players kind of get it on the first 2 years. The team gets it on the second 2 years, especially in year 4. Elton trying to avoid that. Hopefully the Packers can avoid a similar situation with Zach Tom down the road. But this should be a contract that ages extremely well for Green Bay. One of the contracts that we have talked about, not when it comes to Rasheed Walker, with Zach Tom, but when it comes to Rasheed Walker, is the Dan Moore contract that has happened this offseason. And if you look at his contract, what he was able to get, and this has been a much talked about contract all throughout the offseason, Dan Moore in free agency. And you're probably like, who? I'm sorry, Dan Moore? Who's Dan Moore? Dan Moore was a left tackle for the Pittsburgh Steelers who was supposed to be a backup, ended up playing quite a bit for them this past year, led the league in sacks allowed this past year. The Tennessee Titans say, hey, we're cool with that. We're going to give you a 4-year, $82 million deal. 4 years, $82 million deal for Zach Moore, the guy that led the league in allowed sacks. Now, he is a left tackle. I will give him that. There is still this bizarro left tackle is more important than right tackle, which I don't believe to be true anymore. And if you talk to some very smart people, it's not. I mean, some of the best defensive ends in all football are playing left end. And yes, there's it's a blind side for most quarterbacks, yes, but you're in shotgun so much now that your peripheral vision is so much better than it used to be in behind the line. And we don't need to get into all of that. But basically, this Dan Moore, who signed with the Titans, gets 4 years, $82 million, $20.5 million per season. And so you're thinking, man, if Rasheed Walker hits free agency, Rasheed Walker's better than Dan Moore. Like Rasheed Walker might get, this type of contract, like a 4-year, $84 million sort of type of deal if he hits free agency. Well, the Packers lock up Zach Tom again with a 4-year, $88 million contract, only $6 million more than what Dan Moore got. And here's the other piece of this. Dan Moore was a fresh 4-year, $80 million or $82 million contract. So that'll start this year in year 2025. Zach Tom is a 4-year extension on top of the year that he already has on his deal. So this effectively is a remaining 5-year contract that's going to be around $92 million. The contract's even better for Green Bay. First, I want to say that I am pro players getting their money in these contract situations. The second contract especially is a player's usually one huge opportunity at a payday, because a lot of guys don't get the huge third-year contract, and the first one is a rookie contract, which is not that much. And when we talk about not that much, I get we're talking about millionaires here, and for a normal day-to-day working person, that's a whole heck of a lot of money. And I get that. I'm not trying to mitigate that. It's just the football world that we live in. And we all slurp up football like it's the greatest thing in the world, because it kind of is. Because of that, these deals get crazy. I understand that. And to me personally, I would rather have them go to the players on the field than the crazy billionaires. Again, a discussion we probably don't need to get into, but I'm always pro the player getting their money. I don't think Zach Tom, when he made his phone call to his family, that he got a $88 to $92 million contract. I don't think that was filled with tears and frustration and anger. I'm sure that was probably a pretty happy Zach Tom on the phone telling his family he just signed an $88 to $92 million contract. So I'm sure he is very excited about this. But from a Packers fan standpoint, there are very few contracts that I see that I get like giddy about, in the regards of like, this is a potential steal for Green Bay, or this is a huge value for Green Bay. Zach Tom's contract is a massive steal, in my opinion, for the Green Bay Packers. You are getting him on a remaining contract that is going to bring him through the best years of his football playing career. And that is huge, because when he sees the end of this contract, he is only going to be, he'll be 31 years old when he's a free agent, I should say. So this contract, he's 26 this year, will take him through his age 27, 28, 29, and 30 seasons. Literally the prime of Zach Tom's career. So he'll not see free agency until age 31. And again, you are getting one of the players here that checks every one of Green Bay's boxes. So a draft and develop, a guy that they brought in through the draft and brought in through their system, somebody that has exceeded expectations, somebody that been a consummate professional on the field and in the locker room. He's actually their NFL PA rep, which again usually goes to show that there is a lot of love for him and respect for him, and just kind of smarts for him as well in that locker room. He is extremely versatile. So now with this contract, you're not expecting him to go anywhere besides right tackle at this point in time. Like that's going to be his, unless you at some point move him to left tackle, which there's no real reason to do. He's going to be a right tackle, but he's extremely versatile. So if you needed him for a down or a play or a series or a game or whatever, or a couple weeks to go play guard or center, he could do that as well. And knock on wood, he's also been extremely durable. So he hits everything that you're looking for in a player. He did not break the bank. Again, anything more than what basically Dan Moore got. In fact, I would argue his contract is better than Dan Moore's because of that remaining year on the deal. And this actually acts almost like a 5-year deal. That's even less money. So per year, I should say. This to me is a phenomenal deal. Zach Tom again breaks the record for the largest signing bonus. So there's certainly some wins here for him. I mean, he gets $30.2 million up front. I don't know if most people realize, like, this is a true like signing bonus that you get $30.2 million right away. There's no waiting on that. You don't have to wait till year 2 to get part of this, or year 3. That $30.2 million signing bonus is paid out immediately. And by the way, when we talk about, the Green Bay is just working on sledding hills and, the Titletown district, they don't care. All of that stuff allows them to have that reserve of money that they have. A lot of teams, I shouldn't say a lot, some teams will not do these type of deals because they don't have the cash money up front. Like the ownership group doesn't want to pay $30.2 million out of pocket immediately for a player in a signing bonus like this. And Green Bay will do this all the time, which gives them a lot of flexibility on the back end of the contract, like we're seeing right now with Elton Jenkins, where you get to year 3 and year 4 and the Packers have a lot of team control, like we saw with Jair Alexander when it got to year 4 and the Packers had all the control in the world over that contract. And if they wanted to keep Jair or not on that deal, or if they wanted to move in a different direction. And they now will have this flexibility at the end of year 3 and 4. They'll have it, by the way, with Xavier McKinney, and they'll have it with Josh Jacobs. They'll have it with Aaron Banks. They'll have it with Nate Hobbs. This is a contract structure that Green Bay goes to all the time. So they're going to have that flexibility at the end of this contract. And what Green Bay does is they always give themselves outs. If a player's not playing up to par or up to expectations, they all of a sudden have the ability to move on from that player. And it's just not a thing that a lot of teams do. And they can do that in large part because they give these large signing bonuses up front and are able to structure the contract in a way that pays them up front a little bit more, but allows them those outs on the back end. It's not a perfect contract structure, in my opinion. I think there's some things that, again, you run into, like we're seeing with Elton Jenkins right now, but I do understand why they do it. But overall, I'm so happy for Zach Tom that he's getting this big payday. I think he's probably uber excited about it. But from a Packers standpoint and a utilization of resources standpoint, this is about as amazing of a contract that I think you could have ever possibly hoped for. As I went into the offseason, I was probably I at one point thought that if he reached, next season, I thought this could get into the 28 million range. And if you told me that he signed this offseason, I thought for sure we were talking about at least 25 million per year on like a 4-year deal. So like a 4-year, $100 million deal. It did not reach up to that. And if you're looking at like a contract that, would kind of be comparable. Now I know again that this player is a left tackle. He probably was arguably a little bit better maybe than Zach Tom. But, Darisaw signed a 4-year, $76 million extension, but that was in 2024. And it actually did get him to his overall contract value of more of around $104 million. It's tough to kind of go apples to apples with some of these based on some of them, but he got, I thought that Zach Tom would have been a little bit more in the range of, again, like a 23, 24, 25 million per year. And he came in well under that, which, again, I think is a huge steal for Green Bay. I know Brett Coleman on Twitter also posted that this is an absolute steal for Green Bay, and I certainly could not agree more. I have been terrible in the fact that I have not brought in our super producer, Tommy Wartz, up until this point. Tommy, I know you're probably pretty pumped, A, about the Brewers, B, about a Zach Tom extension as well, but how are you doing on this beautiful Tuesday morning?
I'm very good, Andy, very good. Tuesday morning here is going well so far in Milwaukee. Yeah, the Zach Tom deal looks awesome, and especially when you see contracts around the rest of the NFL where, not even just sticking strictly to the tackle position, but, there are players that are upset and want to be the next highest paid guy at that position, right? Looking at an example of Micah Parsons with TJ Watt just signing that deal, right? It's always a race, it feels like, to get that first contract in before the next contract comes in. It was a big part when Jordan Love signed his extension, that he got paid before Dak Prescott got paid. So to have Zach Tom take a deal that still makes him a bunch of money for quite some time here, and he wasn't even going to compete for that top highest paid tackle position, feels like a really big win-win for both parties in this state too. And, you're talking about a guy who at his peak, PFF loved, right? He could be a top 5 tackle in this league, especially at the right tackle position. It's a great deal for Green Bay, and excited to see what Zach Tom does. I do think that there is more flexibility for him to move to left tackle at some point, though, at the end of this, right? If Green Bay strikes out on Rasheed Walker and on Jordan Morgan, they're going to point to Zach Tom first.
Sure. I think you're potentially right. I just think there's a little bit less upside in doing it, in the fact that he's already a great right tackle, and I think he'd be great at left too. But like the upside of moving him to left isn't like anything, in my opinion, better than what he would be at right. And the downside is he's worse, and now you're hurting your offensive line in totality.
Sure.
But we'll see. I think if you look at him, he definitely prototypes more as a left tackle than he does as a right tackle. So again, it could be a situation where at some point they need him to do that. But again, that just goes back to, this is an incredibly versatile piece that if you need him to do other stuff, whether that's center, guard, tackle, left tackle, right tackle, it doesn't matter. Like, there are so few players that have true 5-position versatility, and Zach Tom is one of them. And Green Bay now has locked him up for the next 5 seasons, which is so unbelievably huge. So it's not just that he's a really great right tackle as is already. It is also that he does have that true 5-position versatility and gives Green Bay, to your point, Tommy, if all of a sudden, and again, I don't think anyone's necessarily, looking for Green Bay to spend another first round pick or a top, pick on an offensive line. Or let's just go this way. We don't even have to go too far. What if Anthony Belton turns out awesome, but it's very clear that position, his position is right tackle. Like, he just doesn't fit at left tackle. They try him at guard and it doesn't really work. But every time he goes out at right tackle, he just dominates. Like, he looks in it like an amazing right tackle. If that's the case, they absolutely could try Zach Tom at left tackle, right, and then move Jordan Morgan into guard and continue to kind of shuffle those pieces around and see if that would work. So it just, again, if Green Bay, gets to a point in a future draft where there's an unbelievable right tackle on the board, but it's a right tackle only, they don't have to be like, nope, we can't take him because Zach Tom's taking up that spot. If an unbelievable right tackle falls to them at whatever round of the draft and they want to take that guy, they can take him because they know at some point that they can move Zach Tom if they absolutely need to. So no, just again, that versatility is going to absolutely be huge for them as well. And it's definitely something that, again, I think goes into that evaluation as well. If you're looking at tackle contracts, here are the tackles that are getting either the same or more on a per year basis. So Tristan Wirfs is top of the league at $28.12 million, followed by Penei Sewell at $28 million per year, Trent Williams at $27.5 million per year, Christian Darrisaw at $26 million per year. And when I talked about Darrisaw earlier, that's why I kind of talked about, hey, I think he ends up, being in that range. Again, he ends up being $4 million less per year, which over a 4-year deal, it's an additional $16 million in savings for Green Bay. Lane Johnson at $25 million per year, Laramie Tunsil at $25 million per year, Andrew Thomas, $23.5 million per year, Jake Matthews at $22.5, and then your list of two $22 million players: Jordan Mailata for the Philadelphia Eagles at $22 million per year, Zach Tom for Green Bay at $22 million per year. But then, after that is $20.5 million for Dan Moore. So again, it's a very interesting list of offensive linemen. Look at this is a player that I would be willing to bet the vast majority of our listeners has never even heard of. Alaric Jackson for the LA Rams, who actually had a nice year last year, but is now dealing with blood clots. So we don't need to go into that. But Alaric Jackson for the LA Rams got 18.7, basically 18.8 million per year. Again, the fact that Zach Tom is coming in a few million more than Alaric Jackson, $1.5 million more than Dan Moore. Again, I cannot stress enough how unbelievable this deal is for Green Bay and setting up their future along the offensive line.
Yeah, and you brought up all those names, and I didn't really think necessarily that plan would be the word probably to use for Zach Tom to move, but the option, right? The candidate for that position. And really, that's something that not a lot of the guys you just read off have, that Zach Tom does have, where the versatility that comes into play with Zach Tom and how he played center and started at guard and now is a tackle for Green Bay. They have the luxury of really just they have one of the best 5 locked up forever right now, on as long as they want him, at least for the Green Bay Packers. They will have one spot filled. Zach Tom is going to be moving around on the offense. Maybe he finds a home at right tackle. I hope he finds a home at right tackle. But now, for the next 4 years, you can write down Zach Tom's name in Sharpie, wherever you want to write it down now for the Green Bay Packers. And that's not something that a lot of those guys you just said have that luxury of, for those contracts that are both higher than him and in the same range as him right now, too. That's easily Zach Tom's biggest strength. Not only is he a great right tackle, but he can be great anywhere you put him.
Yeah, which is, again, it's huge for Green Bay. I'll say it one more time. Love this contract. It is better than I possibly could have expected. We'll see what the actual, sort of year by year signing bonus and overall contract evaluation is once that contract officially comes out. But again, this is a deal that should age incredibly well for Green Bay and should set them up for success along that offensive line for the foreseeable future. And again, prime of his career, ages 27, 28, 29, and 30 for the 4 years that he will be on that extension. So again, just a win all the way around for Green Bay. Wasn't the only roster move that they made yesterday. They did release kicker Alex Hale as well, something that I thought might happen once they put him on the non-football injury list, had an eye injury per multiple reports that are out there. year, and it was just going to limit him. And they needed another kicker in camp to kind of take some of the just work off of a plus 30-year-old Brandon McManus. You don't want him having to do all the kicking all throughout training camp. So I would expect another transaction is coming to bring another kicker in. Whether they use the international exception and the international pathway program to do that remains to be seen. Green Bay does still have multiple spots open. So remember, they had one roster spot open going in. They then released Nesta Jade Silvera as well as Cameron Young. So they got up to 3 roster spots available. We found out yesterday that they signed a wide receiver. That wide receiver is Colorado's Will Shepherd, who, again, signed with Green Bay. It has not been confirmed yet, but all the reports are out there. Jordan Schultz is the first one that I saw on it. Shepherd is a 6'3", 205 wide receiver, lined up primarily outside. Caught 48 of 69 passes for 620 yards and 6 touchdowns this past year. So another wide receiver for Green Bay, which brought them down to, again, 2 roster spots. But then with the release of Alex Hale, that brought them back up to 3. So Green Bay has 3 roster spots to play with. One of those will need to be an international player. There's conflicting reports on El Gersma as to whether or not he can't be an international pathway program player. There's conflicting reports as to whether or not they can use the exception on him. I don't think they can, but we'll kind of keep an eye on that. But likely they would need to add 2 players and an international player. We will likely see some of those transactions take place today so that those players are ready to go for camp tomorrow. So tomorrow when we talk, we should have some more transactions to discuss. And of course, we'll have you covered right here on the Pack-A-Day Radio Show for all of those moves and all things Green Bay Packers. We are lucky enough to be joined by Paul Brettel here in just a moment. We are going to, of course, first hit our commercial break. Before we get there, reminder that we have 70-degree temperatures in Milwaukee right now. It is cloudy, a high of 81, a low of 70. We will be back with Paul Brettel. If you missed anything, by the way, yesterday, want to go back and check out any of the shows, you can check us out for free on the Odyssey app or go to thefanmilwaukee.com. But we'll be back with Paul Brettel right after this. We are the Pack-A-Day Radio Show powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Nothing like coming back to a little No Doubt. Welcome back to the Pack-A-Day Radio Show, live from the 1250 AM and 105.7 FM The Fan Studios, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Reminder that the Mason Crosby Show with Mitch Nellis coming up next from 9 to 11, so do not go anywhere. Also, the highly anticipated Border Brouhaha Softball Slam, a spirited charity softball game set to take place this Sunday at the picturesque ABC Supply Stadium in Beloit, with proceeds benefiting Make-A-Wish Wisconsin. All-time leading Packers scorer Mason Crosby will be joined by former Packers Hall of Fame wide receiver Jordy Nelson and other football stars and influencers, promising a thrilling afternoon of camaraderie and sportsmanship. That's why we all show up to games, camaraderie and sportsmanship. Get your tickets at skycarp.com. Right now, joining us on the Fan Guest Hotline, powered by Gruber Law, is the one and only Paul Brettel. You can find him on social media at Paul_Brettel. And of course, covering the Packers wonderfully and beautifully over at ESPN Lacrosse. Paul, how the heck are you doing, my friend?
I'm excellent, Andy. Happy to be here, and we've made it. Training camp is upon us.
We don't have to, kind of dive into what could happen, what we want to happen, what might go wrong, what could go right, who they might sign, who they did sign, who they drafted, who they might draft. Oh, we have now actually reached real on-the-field football stuff, Paul Brettel, and it feels absolutely amazing.
Yeah, 100%. I can't wait. I love this time of the year. The competition, the camp battles, the pads come on, and optimism, right? For all 32 teams, I think there's always optimism this time of the year. And for the Packers, the key word, the buzzword this offseason's been urgency. They know the talent. They know the potential that's on this roster. Now it's about recognizing it.
I do love, and I know it's been talked about ad nauseum at this point, I do love that the very first press conference by Brian Gutekunst after the season ended, we can either call it a season-ending press conference or a start of the offseason press conference, one or the other. It's kind of both. That he specifically went out of his way on that last question to spin it into that opportunity to talk about urgency and really just lay the groundwork for everyone within the organization that it's time to start winning championships again. We have the talent in this building. And I just think, the biggest thing for him is I know he knows that the talent's there, and he just does not want to see that level of complacency at any level of the organization. And I just love that he put that line in the sand at the very beginning. It also, I think, is, and as we've seen, because it's been brought up over and over by everyone throughout this offseason, is that's going to also be a cloud, I think, in a good way. Usually we talk about a cloud in a bad way, but I think it's a cloud in a good way that's going to hang over and sort of set those expectations for this season. I love it. I'm excited to see how everyone responds, and I think that sense of urgency will be there from the day one of camp, and hopefully we feel it tomorrow when we're there, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think behind that, like you mentioned, it was the consistency. Like that to me is the big thing that this Packers team is in search of and what they need to get to that next level. I know that's not always the most fun answer, right? What do they need to get to the next level? What do they need to be a Super Bowl contender? But you look at this roster top to bottom, and the players, the talent is very much there across the roster. And you have in Matt LaFleur and Jeff Hafley two play callers to maximize the versatility that's on this roster as well. I mean, the variety of skill sets on the offensive side of the ball, in the secondary on defense, in the front seven. Like, there is such a wide array of skill sets and talents that Matt LaFleur and Jeff Hafley have available to them to really customize game plans, make adjustments on the fly, throw different looks at opponents, that you can put these players in the best position to be successful. And so again, it's not the most fun answer, right? Talking about consistency. But I think a lot of it is what that comes down to. And we can even look at that from the receiver's perspective, right? Where all the attention has been this offseason. The talent is there. The speed is there. The playmaking, the variety of skill sets. But it's about reducing the drops. It's about winning your one-on-one matchups more consistently. All things we know these players can do. It's about making sure your routes are exactly how they're supposed to be so you're on the same page with Jordan Love. It's consistency at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I know it gets brought up, and I've brought it up certainly as well in the past too. But, when people look at a Super Bowl contender, well, you have to have star players in order to be a Super Bowl contender. And Green Bay just doesn't have those star players. Paul, I don't know how you feel, but I look at this roster and I say, I think Jordan Love can be a Pro Bowl quarterback. I think Josh Jacobs, we know, can be a Pro Bowl running back. Elton Jenkins and Zach Tom, to me, clearly can be Pro Bowl level offensive lineman, and Jenkins has been. I look at Tucker Kraft. I think he can be a Pro Bowl tight end. They may not have a Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver this season, but we know that they have all the depth, talent, and unique pieces that they need to be successful at that spot. Rashawn Gary, Kenny Clark along the defensive line can be Pro Bowl caliber defensive linemen. I think Edgerrin Cooper absolutely can be that at linebacker as soon as this season. I think Xavier McKinney, I would even put Evan Williams in that conversation, where if he has that step in the right direction, I think even he can be in that conversation at safety as well. They may not have the corner, again, that maybe makes that run. I think they probably, if Keyshawn Nixon dedicates to kick returner again, could probably be a kick returner. I think Brandon McManus could probably make it as a kicker as well. Like, I think there's actually quite a few Pro Bowl caliber players on this team. And if those players do play at that level, I think this team does have the stars to compete at the highest of levels, not to mention the depth. And now, to your point, it just comes down to the consistency.
Yeah, I think that's a spot on evaluation of this roster. And once again, from a age perspective, this Packers team is going to be one of the younger, if not the youngest team in the NFL again this year. But as Matt LaFleur says, they are not young in terms of snaps played anymore. Like that narrative is now long gone in terms of on-field games, snaps, all of that stuff. This is now a pretty experienced Packers team going into largely, especially on the offensive side, it's the third season that this group has been together. And when we talk about that consistency component, obviously it's individually, but from a team perspective, against the NFC's better teams last year, we know they lost those games to Detroit, Minnesota, Philadelphia. And I think a lot of that hinged on how those games started, right? The Packers got off to really slow starts in a number, if not all of those performances in those games. And when you're going against high caliber opponents, you can't dig yourself in a hole like that and have to play catch up. That's as we saw, not a recipe for winning football. So I think the added experience of how to start those games more quickly, how to come out faster, take advantage of those opportunities earlier on, again, can hopefully be part of the recipe for helping this Packers team take that next step forward. And while we talked about, as you mentioned, the high-end caliber players that this Packers team has, there's a lot of competition throughout this roster as well. And that's something that Brian Gutekunst, really since the 2023 offseason, has made a major emphasis in prioritizing. And obviously you hope competition raises the level of, there it is again, urgency, and then that urgency raises the level of play.
All right, so I got a question for you. This Packers team, of course, right now is 88 players on the roster. How many are over the age of 27? So are 28 or older? Do you have a guess as to how many are over the age of 27?
Oh, goodness. I would guess, I'm going to go less than 10. I'll go 6.
You are spot on, my friend.
Really?
That's why we
Wow.
bring you on as often as we can. It is 6 players. Here are the 6 players on the 88-man Packers roster over the age of 27. Zane Anderson at 28, Keyshawn Nixon at 28, Kenny Clark and Elton Jenkins at 29. And the only 2 players that are age 30 or older are both special teams players. Matt Orzik coming in at a solid age 30, and then, of course, Brandon McManus at age 33. So only specialists are over the age of 29 on this team, and only 4 other players, 4 skill position players that are over the age of 27, and none of them are 30 years old yet. So, yes, I would very much expect this team still to be one of the youngest in all of football, if not the youngest. We'll see where that ultimately comes out when we get to a 53-man roster, but it's pretty incredible how young and talented that this team is. But again, urgency, consistency, going to be 2 of those main themes. We're being joined by Paul Brettel. Follow him on social media at Paul_Brettel, and of course over on ESPN Lacrosse, where Paul, I do not say this just because you are a guest on the show. Your post-training camp breakdowns and updates are a go-to for me every single time, where, before I do my episode for the next day, I've got all my notes. And then the 2 that I go through, you and Bill Huber, who we're also going to have on later this week, I always double check, because you and Bill are the 2 most detailed, in my opinion, of where I can go and be like, oh, that's right, that did happen, and I forgot about that. Because as you know, Paul, as much as we try to keep our eyes on everything that's out there, there are 91 guys, maybe there's a few injuries, but there's 91 guys out there in some capacity, not even including coaches, and trying to keep an eye on everything throughout the entirety of a 2.5 hour, whatever it ends up being, practice is an impossibility. So getting your second set of eyes and all the detail that you put into it is phenomenal, and I'm very excited about reading. You better not slack on it this year, Brettel.
I won't.
I'm going to need you as a second pair of eyes out there for all of those practices. I appreciate you a ton on that.
Well, thanks.
All right, enough.
I was going to say I appreciate you as well, because I do the same with all your play-by-play stuff that you do. Because usually I cap it off like the big stuff, right? The competitive periods, the 2-minute drill, the red zone period, and I always go to Andy's Twitter account to double check to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Well, I appreciate that a ton. Enough, complimentary stuff towards each other. Nobody cares about that. Let's talk about Zach Tom, because obviously the big story of yesterday was Zach Tom's contract extension. A huge deal for Zach Tom. I mean, first of all, getting 88 to 92 million. I'm sure, again, that was a very happy phone call to his family. From a Packers standpoint, I think getting him through the prime of his career, 4 years, 88 million, 22 million per year. This seems like a huge win for Green Bay, but clearly, I think, a win for both sides.
Yeah, 100%. And this was always one of those situations, contracts, where it was always a matter of when versus if, right? I mean, Zach Tom has established himself as one of the better offensive tackles, right or left side, in the NFL. And the numbers from last season in pass protection, ESPN's pass block win rate metric. How often are you winning your matchups, holding your block for at least 2.5 seconds? He was top 15 among tackles, again, in the run game by PFF's metrics. Again, graded out as one of the better offensive tackles last season. So a very well-rounded skill set, a foundational piece at one of the most important positions on the football field. And what's important to note as we look ahead to 2025 for Zach Tom, because again, played over 1,100 snaps last season. We talked about his level of play, but this time a year ago, he was still recovering from a pec injury. So one big difference this offseason for him compared to last is he was able to go through off-season programs. He was not available to start a training camp last year. And when he did return, it was a bit of a expedited ramp-up process, right, to get ready for week 1 of the regular season. So I think that's going to be, as we look for, right, what's the next step for Zach Tom? And by his own words, again, consistency is the big thing he talked about during off-season programs. I think a catalyst for that can be the fact that he's had this whole off-season to build up his strength, right? Because he talked about how in the early going, right, recovering from that pec injury, that the lack of strength from that muscle at times, right, how that can impact your technique and things like that, your fundamentals. But again, hasn't had to navigate that this offseason, so it can be a real jumping off point for him, having all these months to prepare for the season.
Yeah, I just could not be more thrilled for him. It's the perfect guy to give an extension to. Versatility, consistency. He's been able to get out there. Again, knock on wood, he's been healthy. This is just a player that you kind of want to reward with that type of contract. And again, the fact that you get him through the prime of his career, there's just, again, so many wins here for, I think, both sides. And just love that Zach Tom's going to remain a Green Bay Packer for the foreseeable future. One of the things that I know has been talked about, and I know you've kind of brought it up recently as well, is how the Packers should be much more adjusted and ready for the second year of Jeff Hafley's defense. Now, in year 1, the results were, I think to most people, a resounding success, pretty much top 10 in any category that you want to view it under. I do wonder a little bit of some of the level of competition that they, there was. I don't want to say they're completely bad team merchants, but there were some bad teams and some bad quarterbacks that they did have on that schedule. But regardless, it's a still very impressive first year under Jeff Hafley, but they should even be theoretically better and more ready to go in year 2. How could you kind of see that playing out over the course of this season, I should say?
Yeah, I think a big part of that, year 2 jump, and we talk about that with players all the time, but that's the same for operating in defensive systems. I mean, offense and defense are different, right? We know that. But go back and look at the 2019 Packers offense versus the 2020 Packers offense in year 1 and year 2 of Matt LaFleur. A very, very different, more efficient group during the 2020 season. So with Jeff Hafley, year 2, that continuity component is huge, right? A year ago at this time, again, we're rewinding, they're implementing the defensive system, the playbook, the calls, the terminology, everything at this time. Obviously now all that stuff has been implemented. The players are obviously well-versed in what not only their responsibilities are, not only what the responsibilities are of their position group, but everyone on the defensive side of the ball. I believe it was Xavier McKinney talking about how, the just being in sync with what the defensive front's doing, and then having such a deep understanding of your defense, your roles, and knowing, all right, here's the looks we're going to show where we're going to be. Here's how the offense is going to want to attack us. Like, there is next level, right, understanding of how what you're supposed to do, but also how opponents are going to attack you as well. And then from Jeff Hafley's perspective, someone who is so good at adjusting, adapting, being flexible to the game plans that he builds, the understanding of where each of his players on the roster, what they do well, maybe what areas of strengths or areas of their game that aren't strengths. All right, how do we put those players in the best position to maximize those abilities so they can play fast, so they can be in a position to be successful? One of my favorite things that we've heard from Jeff Hafley is, and this was before last season, he talked about, you can have the best play ever drawn up on paper, right? But if the players aren't able to go out there and execute it, doesn't really matter, does it? The chance of that play being successful is significantly decreased. And so having that understanding of where these players are at their best and how to put them in that position to maximize the skill sets and abilities that they have, I think all of that can be a huge boost to this group heading into year 2.
Were you along the sidelines with us last year when Jeff Hafley came over and coached the secondary? Mm-hmm. And like that was still one of my favorite parts of training camp in 2024, where like Hafley just decided during a period that he was going to coach the defensive. I think it was the corners. They were working on press coverage during that. And just watching, hearing, and listening to him coach. And the beautiful thing about Haf was, and in that situation was, he was coaching the overall technique, but he also knew how to tune it to the specific player. I remember specifically when Jair was great in the fact that like he wasn't just some veteran that was, oh, I already know what I'm doing, I don't care. Like he wanted to know exactly what he was supposed to be doing, and Jair kind of went through it and showed, well, this is kind of how I do it. And Jeff Hafley, instead of like forcing him to do it exactly the way that he was teaching everyone else, he's like, Ja, you're already we're teaching this to get you to do this. He's like, you're already doing that. He's like, you're skipping the intermediate step in order to get to where we want you to do, because you just have your, at a bizarro alien level, the ability to do this. His just ability to, again, tweak it to make sure that each player is kind of coached at where they need to be coached. It was a masterclass. I loved every second of it. I was just glued to watching him coach the players. Green Bay is so lucky to have him, not only as a coordinator, but a coach out there on the field. Some team, and again, I'm not necessarily wishing this in the near future, but some team is going to get a heck of a head coach at some point, in my opinion, in Jeff Hafley, and it'll definitely be deserved. Paul, before we get you out of here, just, kind of what's going to be top of mind for you as you are out at training camp tomorrow and through the first part of this is, some of these storylines, matchups, whatever that you want to kind of see play out to begin with.
Yeah, again, competitions, training camp battles, there's going to be a lot to keep our eyes on, but the one that I'll be watching closely early on is that left tackle rotation. I mean, not to be forgotten about in everything, right, is that Rasheed Walker and Jordan Morgan are competing for that starting left tackle spot, and Walker, starter for pretty much the full last 2 seasons for this Packers. He's provided a stable presence for that group. This isn't, to me anyways, one of those situations where you go into the offseason and you're thinking, man, we really got to get better play out of that left tackle spot. I think it's just more so the nature of, you have Jordan Morgan on your roster who you drafted in the first round a year ago. And while injuries limited him last year, he played right guard, left tackle. It's his natural position. I think that's where he played really just about every snap during his career at Arizona. And when, Luke Butkus, the offensive line coach, talks about Jordan Morgan and what, his skill set brings to that position, it's the movement, it's the athleticism, it's the ability to operate in space, right? So that's one of the, getting him back to that natural position. So how that unfolds, how the playing time or the practice time between those two unfolds, how the Packers prioritize that, I'm going to be really, really curious to see. And this is just my interpretation of this training camp competition. But for me, until I see otherwise, till proven otherwise, I fully expect Rasheed Walker to be their starting left tackle come week 1 of the regular season. I view this, and again, my view, I view this as more so looking ahead to 2026, right? Rasheed Walker's a free agent, getting Jordan Morgan back to his natural position, getting him acclimated. And hey, if throughout the next month of the season of training camp, he proves that he really is the better starting left tackle, then the Packers are starting the better left tackle, right? Like that's I guess on its own would be, from the Packers perspective, right, to get the best 5 out there, that would be a win. But how I see it is, this is still Rasheed Walker's job. Jordan Morgan has to go out and seize control of that job. And again, I think it's looking ahead, preparing them for what's coming next offseason when Rasheed Walker's a free agent.
Well, Rasheed Walker has about 80 million reasons to go out
Yeah.
and play his absolute best football at left tackle this upcoming season. So hopefully that ends up being the case. And if Jordan Morgan just ends up being a first round, unbelievable backup and first guy up, if anything happens, I don't necessarily hate that. I know people are like, oh, it's a waste of it. Like, they're going to need the depth throughout the course of the season. And all I care about is that when he gets in there, whether it's left tackle, right guard, or any other position, that he's ready to go and play good football. And if he's ready, like I said, they're going to need him at some point this year. Paul, I cannot thank you enough for taking some time this morning. Of course, at Paul_Brettel, ESPN Lacrosse. I know you've got the YouTube channel as well. What would you like to talk about on your way out here?
Yeah, I appreciate it as always, Andy. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Follow me on Twitter, Paul_Brettel. All my work over at ESPNLacrosse.com and on YouTube, The Paul Brettel Show.
Check out that Paul Brettel show. It's absolutely fantastic, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more content coming out now that we have reached training camp season. A huge thank you to Paul for joining us on the Fan Guest Hotline, powered by Group of Law. One call, that's all. Again, make sure to follow him at Paul_Brettel. We'll be back talking more Packers right after this on the Pack-A-Day Radio Show. Welcome back to the Pack-A-Day Radio Show. A huge thank you to Paul Brettel for joining us this past segment. Make sure you're checking out his work over at ESPNLacrosse.com. Also a reminder that the Mason Crosby Show with Mitch Thunder Nellis coming up next from 9 to 11. And as always, make sure that you are checking out the Pack-A-Day Radio Show on our podcast platforms, as well as over on YouTube. You can find us Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your favorite pods. Catch the full episode, listen by individual hour, or jump straight to the highlights. Just open up your favorite podcast app, search Pack-A-Day Radio Show, hit the follow button so you get every minute of every show your way and on time. Make sure to like, subscribe, give those 5-star reviews when you can. And also, while you're out there, make sure to check out the Pack-A-Day podcast as well. We got you covered 365 days a year. A great conversation with Justice Mosqueda out there today. All right, Tommy, leadoff show coming up today. The Brewers, hashtag good at baseball.
Hashtag very good at baseball, actually, Andy. They are so exciting. 11 games in a row now, 1 win away from free burgers over at George Webb's. That's what everyone's looking forward to. And they get and who better than to do that is Jacob Mizorowski on the bump, right? It just works out. How can you not be romantic about baseball? That if free burgers lies in the hands of Jacob Mizorowski, everyone's excited to watch that. And we were just talking about it in between the break. I mean, 11 in a row is crazy, but every day, for the last 4 days at least, Andy, according to the Potawatomi Sportsbook, they've been underdogs the entire time. And they have one of the best records in baseball. And the entire Dodgers series, they were not favored in any of those games. They weren't favored again yesterday. But whenever this team just clicks, and, the old, tale of, hitting is contagious, right? The Brewers embody that so much. Yesterday they were getting no hit through 5 innings, and then all of a sudden 3 pitches in a row, and they're up 3-0 in the 6th inning yesterday. They put up a 4 spot there, and when they have a 4-run lead, they just don't lose. They just don't lose ball games anymore. They are, I believe, 50-4 when they're leading after 7 innings in a ball game now on the season. And when they're leading after 6, I think they're 51-4, so you can add an extra win in there. They're really just maybe the most complete team in baseball right now. I don't think we can be too worried about peaking too early because the depth on this team just goes so much past the starting 9 and the starting 5. And that's the part that makes me the most excited to watch Brewers baseball every day.
Yeah, it's really, really fun right now. And again, anytime you get to see the Miz pitch. And I've got good news for you, Tommy. The Brewers are once again underdogs today. So they can go out and, try to win again as underdogs, because why isn't the best team in baseball just an underdog every single day that they go out and play baseball? So you got the Miz on the mound, Brewers underdogs. It's Seattle minus 125 per the Potawatomi Sportsbook, Milwaukee plus 105. Should be a fun one tonight. I personally, I know that's not for everyone. I love night baseball because I just get to kind of finish up all my podcasts and stuff. And while I'm editing, I've got Brewers on in the background. It's a perfect time for baseball for me. So sign me the heck up for that. Should be, again, another really fun one tonight. We'll see what that lineup looks like. The trade deadline getting closer and closer. So great time to be a Milwaukee Brewers fan. We'll wrap up with some Packers, though. Let's get to our Potawatomi Sportsbook final thought of the day.
You got to do some smart thinking.
It's time for Andy Herman's final thought of the day.
What are you thinking?
Powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook.
What the hell were you thinking?
You're listening to the Pack-A-Day Radio Show on 1250 AM and 105.7 FM The Fan.
So really quick, with the idea that Zach Tom just signed his new contract, there was some question as to whether or not or how this could potentially affect Elton Jenkins. Per multiple reports, apparently this doesn't really affect Elton's contract negotiations. I'm not sure that's totally true. There are now 2 offensive linemen that are making more money per year than what Elton Jenkins is making, with Aaron Banks and Zach Tom, neither of which have made a Pro Bowl. Elton Jenkins has, so I think there's probably got to be a little bit something there. I do think Green Bay is going to want to hold firm on this and not set precedent with 2 years remaining on the contract. I do have a potential solution, though. I think one of the issues that the Packers ran into with Jair Alexander is that there was no early guarantee in his final year in March that made the Packers make an early decision, which allowed that thing to drag out through the entirety of this offseason, where they just eventually released him anyway. I do wonder if they could change some of that base salary in 2026. He's due, it's like $20 million somewhere on there in base salary. Just turn a huge chunk of that into a roster bonus that's set to pay out on the 3rd day of the league year. That would kickstart the Packers having to make a decision early earlier on so that Elton Jenkins would not be caught in limbo. It doesn't cost the Packers any additional money. It would just make it so that they have to make that decision a little bit earlier and would give Elton Jenkins a little bit more confidence that either A, the Packers are going to commit to him very early next offseason, or B, he's going to be a free agent when basically everybody else is a free agent as well, and give him that opportunity to sign a big contract right away. I think changing that language in the contract would be a potential win for both sides, and would give Elton Jenkins, again, a little bit more confidence that he's not going to go into 2026 into a similar situation that Jair had this past offseason. But that is a tale that continues to drag on, and hopefully Elton can be ready to go in training camp sooner rather than later, and they can work out some sort of contract that, or just have him play as is and just figure that out sooner rather than later so that he can get out there, get reacclimated at center, and start working with Jordan Love at that spot. All right, as you know, we're going to be back with Mitch and Mason here in just a moment as we get ready for the Mason Crosby Show. So don't go anywhere, and we'll talk some more Wisconsin sports and Packers football right after this.